Today we will be discussing chapter 5 of Kidnapped. In the last chapter that we read, we learned that David was now on an island and he could see the island of Mull. Okay, and he was about to go and walk there. The story picks up from there. David walks to the island of Mull. यहाँ पे Alan लिखा है, that's wrong. It's David. David walks to the island of Mull from the island of Ered. Just island पर वो होता है. He learns that the name of that island is Ered later on, and he walks toward a house where smoke is coming out. He meets a man who was smoking a pipe. He They were talking, and David got to know from that man who was smoking that the covenant had sunk. And then he asked if David was the boy with the silver button. Then the man tells David that his friend, who is Alan, wants David to go to Tororse. David told the man his story. And how he was kidnapped and how now he's on this strange island that he has no idea about. The man asks him to stay the night. The man's wife offers him bread and meat. The next morning, he leaves for Tororse. Through his journey, he saw many poor people. He even lost his way a few times. But the problem was that he couldn't ask anybody because nobody understood English very well and they could only speak Gaelic, which David doesn't understand. So there was a language barrier because of which he couldn't understand and he couldn't talk to anybody. He had to find his way himself. At 8 p.m., while he was walking towards the way, he became tired and he knocked on a stranger's house and he asked him to let him stay the night. The man refused and he pretended that he doesn't understand English. But when David showed him a few shillings, he said, "Okay, I have some money, I'll give it to you." The man quickly understood English also. He also allowed him to stay for the night. The man agreed that if you give me 5 shillings, I will let you sleep here and I will also drop you off to Tororso later on. David agrees, but he was scared. He was scared that the man might be a robber and that he would steal his money while David was sleeping. But nothing of that sort happened. The next morning, this man, who we will refer to as the guide, okay, this guide then took David to a man whose name is Hector McLean to exchange 1 guinea for a few shillings, like you exchange 1000 rupees for 10 notes of 100 rupees, like that. वो उसको हेक्टर के पास लेकर जाता है so that David can exchange 1 guinea for a few shillings. Hector gave David 20 shillings in exchange for 1 guinea. They both stayed the night at Hector's house as the guide was a little too drunk and they couldn't go back home. The next day, the guy told David that Tororse was straight ahead. उसको बोलता है कि चलो, I'll take you. If you go straight, you will reach there. David then asks him that you were supposed to drop me to Tororse, right? यही agreement था that if I give you money, you will take me to Tororse also. The man now again pretended that he doesn't understand English. Now he was acting because he didn't want to go. He wanted more money. David then paid him 2 more shillings and he said, "Chalo, we had a deal of 5. I'll give you 2 more. So total 7." Again, they started to walk. A few miles later, the man sat down and he refused to walk. Again, he started to pretend that he doesn't understand English. David became angry and he attacked the man. He hit him in the face, took his shoes and his knife and he walked away. He said, "अब मुझे उसको पैसे ही और नहीं देने." He takes his revenge and he leaves. Half an hour later on his journey, David now meets a blind man who was a teacher of religion and he was carrying a pistol that David saw. That he was carrying a pistol with him. This blind man offers to take David to Tororse since he knows the area well. As a proof of his know-how, he describes the area where they were walking in great detail to David. The blind man then asks David questions, personal questions like where is his home and if he was very rich. The man tried to walk near David and David went further away from him. जैसे जैसे वो आदमी उसके करीब आता, David would step a little back. And they continued this weird dance till the man cursed David in Gaelic. David then shouted at the man that you can't curse me, you can't give me abuses. I have a pistol with me also. The man then curses David again. He abuses him again. He turns around and then he goes in the opposite direction. David goes straight ahead. He continues his journey and he reaches Tororse finally. And then he spends the night in a cheap hotel. The next day, next morning, because he was tired, he slept. The next day, he wakes up and he took a ferry. A ferry is a boat. He takes it from Tororse to another place, which is called Kinlocheline. On his journey, he meets a man who's Macrob. Macrob is also the captain of the ship. David was very anxious to talk to him. He couldn't wait to talk to Macrob. Why? Because the surname Macrob belongs to some of the family in Alan's clan. So he thought that maybe this captain knows Alan. But the problem was that David couldn't find a chance to talk to him privately. उसको अकेले में बात करनी थी, but he was not getting a chance for it. After they reached their destination in Kinlocheline, David then talked to Macrob and he asked if he knew Alan Brick Stewart. And he said, you know what, I want to find this man whose name is Alan Brick Stewart. And if you help me, I will give you a few shillings in exchange. After hearing this, the captain Macrob, he became really offended. He became really angry. And he tells David that I don't need your money. I will help you without it also. Alan is in France. He's not here. He has left Scotland and now he is in France. The captain then tells David that what I would suggest is that you should spend the night at a hotel in Kinlocheline. And then the next day, you should start moving towards the house of James Stewart. James Stewart, who is Alan's brother, in Auckland. So you should go from here, go to Auckland, reach Alan's brother's house. Now, the next day, David starts his journey. On day one of his journey, he traveled from Morven, which is another place in Scotland, to Ardgour. On day two, he had to cross one loch. Loch is the Scottish word for a lake. किसी दरिया को Scottish में loch बोलते हैं. So he passed one loch at Corrin and another in Ballachulish. Upon reaching, he had to ask for directions to James Stewart's house. So Captain Macrob advised David not to speak to anybody on his journey. He says that one advice that I can give you is don't talk to anybody on your journey. Hide yourself if you see the redcoats or the Campbells. अगर आपको दुश्मन का कोई नजर आए, हमारा दुश्मन को नजर आए, so you should hide yourself. Now David finds a hotel to stay the night, and he sees that the entire hotel, the room is really dirty. It has a really bad smell. But he saw that it soon began to rain outside, and he was very lucky that he had a shelter to spend the night. All right. The next morning, Alan leaves the hotel early and he meets a man who was a priest. A priest is a person who is a very religious man. His name was Mr. Henderland. They start talking. Generally, they start talking about things when Mr. Henderland mentions Alan. He says that Alan's life is in danger and that the Red Fox is really angry. The Red Fox is hunting for people who used to help Archie, who is Alan's chief, to attack them. They keep on talking and the priest takes David to his home. They say a prayer before sleeping and the priest gives some amount of money to David for his remaining journey. The next day, the priest asked a fisherman, अगले दिन उसको एक लेकर जाते हैं fisherman के पास, and he requests the fisherman to drop David to Appin. Appin is the place where Alan lives. Alan का जो घर है, जो उसका main आबाई घर है, that is in Appin. But now he's sitting in the boat. But before he could dock, before he could get off from the boat, David saw that there was a hill and there were people in red clothes who were climbing this hill to turn people out of their homes. Means उनको घर से निकालने के लिए ऊपर climb कर रहे थे. The fisherman dropped David to the shore. David was now in Appin, which is Alan's home country. David was eating the bread that the priest had given him for his journey, and he was thinking if he should go and find Alan. He says, मैं यहाँ तक तो आ गया हूँ, but should I go further or should I go back to my house? Just then, as he was thinking, he saw that there was a man with red hair on a horse, and behind him was a lawyer. Uske bhi पीछे followed by a servant, and in the last there was a officer on a horse. ये चार लोग horses पर आए. David saw them. He decided that fine, this is my time. I am going to go and find Alan now. That is it. That is my only option. The first man, the one with the red hair, approaches David. David asks him that, can you tell me the way to James Stewart's house? Alan के भाई के घर का रास्ता वो red haired man से पूछता है. David realizes that this man who he just asked the address is the Red Fox, जो कि एलन को और उनके क्लैन को मारने पे तुला हुआ है. This is the enemy. The Red Fox replies to David that if you had asked me this question on any normal day, I would tell you. But while in the middle of the sentence, a bullet is fired and Red Fox fell to the ground. He takes his last breath, and in his last words, he tells his followers, the priest, he tells the officer and the servant and the lawyer to take care of themselves, and he dies. The lawyer becomes shocked. The sheriff is the police officer. He ran up to hurry his soldiers, and the servant began to cry. David then turns around and he looks at the hill, and he sees that there is a man in a large black coat. And David shouted that this is the man who is the murderer. He is the murderer. And David runs towards the hill. The murderer heard David and he ran quickly and disappeared. उस murderer ने सुन लिया कि David ने उसको पहचान लिया है कि वो murderer है, and he runs away. Suddenly, while David was running towards the hill, somebody was warning him to stop. कोई उसको बोल रहा था कि you know what, stop running. जैसे हम किसी चोर को पुलिस रोकती है ना कि stop running, put your hands up, stop. उसी तरह डेविड को कोई रोक रहा था. David yells back to the police and he tells them that instead of stopping me, you should come and run with me. आप मेरे साथ चले. Come with me to the hill. The sheriff and the lawyer, they assume that David is the murderer's companion, कि इसने murder करने में help की है, and because he ran after the bullet was fired. And then the police officer announces that whoever catches David will get a special prize. And that is our lecture for today.